Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So ever since that article in Variety magazine came out in which they interviewed Kevin Feige about the future of the MCU, of Marvel, and he dropped some bombs, y'all. He basically said verbatim, they will be recasting Iron Man and Captain America. And I don't know what to do with this information. I don't know how to feel about this information as someone who is a 41-year-old black nerd who has been following the MCU since the beginning, since our Iron Man dropped in 2008. This is very hard for me to wrap my head around, and I just wanted to come up on here and just talk about the reasons why I respectfully disagree with this decision, but I trust Kevin Feige. He's the only person that actually knows what he's doing over there, even though we've had some misses lately. But with that being said, let's get into it because I have thoughts, I have feelings, and I don't know where to put them. So here we go. So in a recent Variety profile, Marvel Studio president Kevin Feige made this announcement that yes, they will be recasting Captain America and Iron Man, a full reimagining of the characters within the MCU timeline. And in the same breath, they are also going to be recasting the X-Men. He also likened it to the DCU's recastings of Batman and Superman, which we have seen time and time again. We've had Batman played by Val Kilmer, Michael Keaton, Christian Bale, Robert Pattinson, Ben Affleck. And then we've had our Superman recastings where we've had so many Supermans, but Christopher Reeve, Henry Cavill. Right now we have David Cornsweet, who's the Superman under the guidance and creative direction of James Gunn, who is now the head of DC Studios. So while I understand the want, again, from a business perspective, in wanting to recast, and here's my issue with that. Because those universes, those franchises were built to be recasted. That is a big part of the DNA. Generationally, we expect every few years we're going to have a new superhero, a new actor step into that role. And Feige compared these recastings of Superman and Bond as something that's necessary. But this is a significant shift for Marvel fans because we have not done this before in a way that was this intentional. Yes, we have recasted War Machine. Sorry, Terrence Howard. We got Don Cheadle, but that was because of discrepancies and all these other issues behind the scenes. And while I understand the thought process in saying, yeah, we can just recast our legacy characters of Steve and Tony, and that's just going to be that, and the Marvel audiences and the fans are just going to come along for the ride. No, because the MCU was built on continuity versus the DCU and the Bond franchise, which were built to be recast. Essentially, the characters of Tony and Steve were really built around Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. And for me, the characters of Tony and Steve, they didn't just play the characters. Like, I see Robert Pattinson as Batman, but I don't associate him as the Batman. Do you get what I'm saying? With Tony and with Steve, I associate those two actors with those characters. See where we have Christopher Reeve, who's playing Superman, and then a few years pass, and then we're recasting for the next Superman. So let's just fast forward to Henry Cavill, and Henry Cavill's cast as Superman, and then it's like, I'm going to play Superman as this version of myself, but I'm always going to respect the legacy of Christopher Reeve as Superman because it's iconic. He laid the groundwork. He's the GOAT. It's never they're trying to become that version of that character. It's their acknowledgement of it and then making the character their own.
Hey guys, this is Dan from Illinois. Tom, you were really the only actor that not only got to work with Christopher Reeve, but also pretty much got his endorsement to carry the legacy forward. As a person, what does that mean to you? Keep up the great work. Always hold on to Smallville, guys. Love you.
I mean, it was astounding. He said to me, "I'm glad you're the next Superman," and I said to him, "Well, I'm not. I'm playing Clark Kent." And he said to me, "Well, you should be." And I still get chills, and I got chills at the moment. Him and I don't know. Him and I got along. Even if you see that thing we did for the announcement, me sort of razzing him a little bit. You know, we just had the same stupid sense of humor like you and I have. You know what I mean? Like, It was just fun. He was just great.
It's never they're trying to become that version of that character. It's their acknowledgement of it and then making the character their own. Versus Marvel, I feel like that person's always going to have to embody Tony's sarcasm and the way that RDJ presented himself as Tony.
Très bien pour moi. Et toi?
First of all, I feel like an asshole.
Why?
Just because I
D'abord,
don't.
je me sens un peu comme un crétin.
I don't. I would have spoken French, but I was raised by wolves. She went to all these nice schools, and they spent all this goddamn money, and now she's all fancy and comes out, and you just love her. I am an animal. I'm an ugly American. All right? They don't teach French in jail.
Alors, je crois qu'on peut applaudir ça, voilà. Il fallait qu'ils le disent, voilà, par rapport au français impeccable de Gwyneth, qui bien sûr...
Versus Marvel, I feel like that person's always going to have to embody Tony's sarcasm and the way that RDJ presented himself as Tony, the way that Chris Evans presented himself as Steve, because the legacy is tied to it versus, and the continuity versus the actor playing them, it ends, and then someone else can still respect the position and the role that they have while also being able to bring their own tone of voice and personality and emotions to that character. Versus in the Marvel universe, if I just saw someone else playing Natasha Romanoff that was not Scarlett Johansson, I would have lots of questions. And I feel the same way when it comes to Tony and Steve, because the actors basically defined the characters, especially because of their real life stories. When it comes to Robert Downey Jr., when he was cast as Tony in 2008, or the movie dropped in 2008, but when he was cast in Iron Man back in the 2008s, and the movie dropped, and he was going through it. Okay, he was going through a lot of legal troubles, substance abuse issues, and a lot of highs and lows within his personal life and his career. So when he got the role of Tony, that was a big redemption arc for him at that time, where he was getting back on the right path and he was getting his life together. And in parallel, Tony's story is something of redemption too, where he's a billionaire playboy. He doesn't really care about anything in the world. He just knows he makes a lot of money, and he doesn't know or care exactly why, whatever. And then we find out that he's actually selling weapons of mass destruction, and he's, going through this whole crisis of humanity, and like he needs to do something about it and change. And that's what we see in the first Iron Man. So in knowing Robert Downey Jr.'s highs and lows, reckonings and reconciliations, and then we're seeing the same thing in tandem with Tony when the movie dropped in 2008.
There's a lot of quote-unquote B-level superheroes who are on their way to the big screen, but Iron Man seems like the one most likely to rise to A-level.
Yeah, I'm just so glad that it hasn't been done and done well already, and there's a certain destiny to it. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, obviously, I'd have been too young or not quite ready or seasoned enough to do it, but I think it's age appropriate for me to be playing this guy at this time. And also, I wouldn't want to launch into some big, butch season of doing perhaps several of these unless I felt that I was, still mildly youthful enough or could get in good enough shape or represent the character well. So the timing's just great.
Yeah, so I was going to say last thing. You're looking pretty jacked. You been working out or what?
Yeah, I'm yoked. And this is just me, this is just me dry. I didn't even just do a bunch of pull-ups or anything, which would be weird if I had.
Where you've seen Tony's progress over the last few decades as to where he was in being this irresponsible, irrational, hard-headed, thick-skulled playboy to someone with values who eventually ended his story in sacrifice. He was so selfish at the beginning of his introduction to us in the MCU to the end of his legacy in the MCU in Endgame, where he sacrificed himself for the greater good, for the people, for the masses, for the universe at large. And I feel like in recasting Tony, we are going to take that away from him. And it's also the experiences from us as the audience over the last few years, where we've seen him going through conflict and coming to realizations and really sitting with feelings and thoughts, like in Civil War, and, you know, thinking like, you know, we are being very destructive to people's lives and stuff. And yeah, I just think that would take a lot of that weight and the emotional connection that I've developed over the last, you know, over 2 decades with Tony, and in the same breath with Steve, because Steve, also Chris Evans, yes, an actor, did very well for himself. He was in a lot of teen movies, and he was also in Fantastic Four, where he played Johnny Storm, and then he got the role of a lifetime when he was casted as Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, in Captain America: First Avenger.
Let's talk about Chris Evans a little bit. By the way, he got the biggest cheer, which when he came on screen the first time, like, people went nuts. And and I think it really was this movie, like, he's so great in all of these, and like a lot of the other characters have the showier roles or the funnier lines, but he's such the anchor that sort of like ties it all together. Can you talk about casting Chris and what made him right for this? Because he'd also played another superhero right before this, and I don't think that ever really been done before.
It wasn't right before, it was a couple years before.
Okay.
And we were doing a search. We knew we had hoped to cast an American. We had cast an Australian named Chris Hemsworth just before that, and we were saying we've got to find an American. We did a lot of auditions and auditioned a lot of people, including Sebastian Stan, who we said, well, we don't think he's Cap, but he could make a great Bucky and an even better Winter Soldier. So we were thinking about that even back when we were casting the first Avenger, and we couldn't find people. There was nobody rising to the top, and we started going through lists that we had previously crossed out, and his name had been crossed out at one point. Human Torch next. And as we were looking, we were like, why? Let's look at him again, because we needed to find somebody great, and we started looking at his other non-Human Torch movies and started to think about it, and started to go, this guy, he's really good. Like, he's better than people have seen him be before. And he was great. He was the best thing in those movies, in the Fantastic Four movies. And then he came in and he did not do a screen test, and I knew him a little bit from the Fantastic Four days. And we took him around the art department and showed him this cool World War II idea that we had and what we were going to do. And he was like, I'll take the weekend to think about it. And to this day, it's one of the most tense weekends we had to see because we didn't know what we were going to do next. And I kept thinking that if we can't find Cap, we won't be able to make Avengers. And there were a lot of things happening on that movie, including issues with the script, which Joss Whedon came on and helped us. He agreed to do Avengers, and I think maybe the next day I was like, hey, man, how are you? Will you help us on Cap now, right now, too? Right now? And he graciously said yes, because I saw that film as the key to being able to actually make Avengers work. Long story short, a lot of people reached out to him. I think Downey reached out to Evans to try to convince him, and a few other people, and ultimately his mother called him and said, what are you hemming and hawing for? Do it.
Steve's journey was something of triumph, and Chris Evans didn't just play Steve. He brought a lot of soul to Captain America. So in recasting Chris Evans, first of all, I can't see any actor playing these two characters. I'm sure there are many great actors out there who can play the role and kill it. But being defined with the actual live portrayal by these two actors, it seems like it's going to be such a disconnect from me, because deep down in my heart and in my soul, I connect with these two characters because of the actors themselves versus me connecting with the character. Like, my favorite character is Spider-Man, but I don't associate Spider-Man just with Tobey Maguire, because the foundation of Spider-Man was built to be recast. So I can accept all three Spider-Men equally, or you have your favorite, whatever you want. But do you get what I'm saying? So yes, I understand what Feige's saying in terms of the 007 recasting, the DCU recastings, but it's not the same. And yes, he can make a new blueprint and we can start somewhere. And maybe in 20 years, 10 years, I will eat my words. But for now, I just do not see this happening, especially because we're keeping certain characters the same. But the characters of Superman, Spider-Man, 007, it's like modern folklore. And these characters are meant to be rebuilt and reshaped, where Marvel is about continuity. We have followed the journey of these characters. And yes, we've had recastings, but this is more intentional because Feige's saying like this is part of the new phrase, timeline within the MCU. But yeah, like with the MCU characters, in terms of the continuity, we weren't just watching these actors as characters. We were watching the actors grow with these characters over time. And they were evolving in the roles that they were placed in the first place. When it comes to the DC characters, let's just use them for example. They have a story, they have a love, they have a this, they have a that. And that is always the same. That's never going to change. The same goes with Spider-Man. He has Mary Jane Watson as a love. It doesn't matter who plays her. It's always going to be about those two characters versus the actors. And then you have the MCU. So there's Tony and Pepper. You have Tony and Pepper's love story, which is respectfully played by RDJ, and Pepper's played by Gwyneth Paltrow. But those characters have been played by these two actors for over 2 decades. So if we're changing Tony, what does that mean for Pepper? What does that mean for Happy? What does that mean for everybody in Tony's orbit that has remained the same? And yes, I'm including War Machine in that because that again was for behind the scenes controversy and things that were happening above my pay grade. So that was something that had to happen in order for the story to go on. We heard about the news, we accepted it. Don Cheadle is our new War Machine, or he is the War Machine. But that is again because of circumstance versus intention, and that, you know, bringing Steve into it and his relationship with Bucky. Over the last 2+ decades, we see that they've had very, very, very rocky road in terms of getting back their relationship back on track. They lost each other. They found each other. They, you know, one was brainwashed. One was trying to get through to him. They had to go through things. Civil War came. You know, they have gone through it. And then even after Steve's story ends in Endgame, we see the continuance and legacy of Steve in Falcon and Winter Soldier. So they're mentioning of Steve and da-da-da-da. So that always ties back to Chris Evans. Yes, it is Cap, but by proximity and because of the relationship that has been built, when Bucky's mentioning Cap, and no one deserves to hold the shields, you deserve to do that, Sam. It's you. It's because of that friendship that was built over 2+ decades.
Why'd you give up that shield? Why are you making such a big deal out of something that has nothing to do with you? Steve believed in you. He trusted you. He gave you that shield for a reason. That shield, that is everything he stood for. That is his legacy. He gave you that shield and you threw it away like it was nothing. So maybe he was wrong about you. And if he was wrong about you, then he was wrong about me.
Where, you know, Sam and Cap first met, to Sam becoming this buddy cop kind of thing with Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan. So where do we go from here? Like, what does that mean for Bucky's relationship to Cap? But also Sebastian Stan's one of those to play his role in the MCU the longest. So, and now he's, you know, basically getting the mantle passed on to him in terms of leadership, as we've seen in Thunderbolts. So it's just a lot of interconnection within the MCU because they're tied to these specific actors that are playing the characters, that it's hard for me to, you know, remove that and just follow the story of the character itself versus the actor playing the character and bringing that character to life. Because another thing that Feige did mention was that Thor, who's played by Chris Hemsworth, will be the same because he said Thor's in his prime, or Chris Hemsworth is in his prime, which, yes, I agree. That man's fine. So, yeah, continue to play him. But it does kind of bring me back to that cryptic post Chris Hemsworth had a few months ago, or a month or two ago, something like that, where he was basically saying farewell to Thor. So I guess this isn't a farewell. This is not a goodbye. And he's contractually obliged to be Thor for another few years. And that's what I'm saying. While he is a constant in this new reimagining of the MCU timeline, and we're going to have two different versions of Steve and Iron Man, I am like, what do I do with scenes like in Endgame, where Thanos just blew up Avengers Tower? The three of them, Thor, Steve, and Tony, are in their gear, they're suited up, and they're about to take Thanos on before, the whole Avengers Assemble scene where everybody comes back. So like we see the three of them, it's iconic. It's so iconic. And it's even more iconic because of the three actors that were playing them when we first met them eons ago to now. It's literally Endgame. The one-liners in that scene. And then we have the inevitable. We see it in Age of Ultron. Everyone's playing a game. Who can pick up Thor's hammer? Steve kind of almost did, but he didn't. So coming from Ultron, years later, mind you, we're growing relationships. We have new narratives in between that time. And now we're at the end game. We're at final end game. And Steve is able to pick up Thor's hammer. I cannot say the name without messing it up. I'm sorry. Mjolnir. He picks up the hammer and he smacks Thanos upside the head. And, that's like that. Oh, and he had that uppercut. Hayuken. And he did that. And I was like in my feelings. My theater was nuts. We were screaming. We were yelling. We lost our damn minds. What am I supposed to do with that right now? Thor screaming, I'm screaming. Am I supposed to just kind of take that for what it was, accept it, appreciate it, and move on? Because I'll do that if Kevin Feige wants me to, because obviously that's the direction that we're going in anyway, so I have no choice but to do so. But after years of chemistry and building this story and the relationship between these characters, and one's going to be the same, but the other two are going to be different, like, how are they going to approach that? I'm very curious and very interested to know how these relationships are going to play out with this new story. There was this emotional conclusion in Peggy and Steve's story in Endgame as well. So where do we go from here when it comes to that and the emotional arc that they have built, since? Because honestly, how does Marvel honor those relationships moving forward without taking anything away from the emotional storytelling and building that we have been doing for over 2 decades? And I did see a few, not a lot, but a few on TikTok saying like it's the same thing like we're doing right now with Black Panther. And I'm like, bro, no, absolutely not the same. Absolutely not the same. We lost Chadwick because of cancer. Fuck cancer. We lost Chadwick because of cancer. And it came out of nowhere. I remember the day I was upstate with my friends. It was in the pandemic. The pandemic had just started. We went away to tennis camp. I'm sitting at dinner with them. I get a notification on my phone and I'm sitting with them. My friends, I love them so much, but they're 3 white women. And I said like, Chadwick died. And they were like, okay. Like they didn't really get the significance of it. I started bawling my eyes out. I was hysterical crying. And at the table, I used that moment to educate them on the significance and the cultural significance, importance of Chadwick and why this death hit so hard. So to lose him, and it seemed also, which was eventually revealed, that Marvel also didn't know that Chadwick had cancer. So everybody was just kind of, there are so many emotions, but also business decisions that needed to be made. But out of respect of the importance of Chadwick's being cast as T'Challa and also his significance within the industry. He, Denzel Washington helped paid for his schooling. He has a lot of weight within the Black community that a lot of people outside of our community don't really understand, but a lot of people do understand when they do take the time to learn and, become and familiarize themselves with his story. So while immediately recasting T'Challa, Black Panther just seemed egregious. It seemed like, why would we even do that? Because we needed to take that time to mourn. Like I said, the first moment I heard the news, I just started instinctively, I just started crying, because I remember Black Panther coming out in February. Is Black History Month. There was such a big thing. I went with my Black friends and my sisters, and it was just like, it was a thing. So to recast T'Challa would be disrespectful to Chadwick. And that's why I loved Black Panther Wakanda Forever. I know critics were hating on it for reasons, but the beginning of the movie, we are really saying goodbye to T'Challa, yes, but for the audience, we're really saying goodbye to Chadwick. And I think that was very significant for me, because it felt like a real life homegoing where, yeah, we're saying goodbye to T'Challa. We don't see his death within the movies because he died in real life off screen, and all that. So it was Ryan Coogler's job, and he did a phenomenal one at that, in telling the story of a death as somewhat of a continuance of legacy. And we had our funeral within the movie. Everyone's in white. We hear the African drums. It's a very, very significant and special moment within the movie, but it was also us moving the story forward, because we're putting him to rest peacefully. And we are going to continue to fight what T'Challa was always adamant about fighting for. And then for the rest of the movie, we see that it's really Shuri who's grappling with this weight of responsibility that was always left and beholden to her older brother. And now the mantle is being passed on to her as becoming the next Black Panther. But right now Marvel's in talks, or they're discussing, or there is discussions in the ether of who will be the next Black Panther. There's talks about Damson Idris and all these other phenomenal Black actors, and I have a take of who I would like to see. So passing the torch to new characters is something that has been done over and over and over again, and that's not my issue, because I believe passing the story to new heroes is important to tell. We have the new Avengers right now, aka Thunderbolts, and then we're gonna have the Young Avengers. I don't know what they're trying to call them now. All of them come out as the younger versions of the Avengers. And then we have, again, like I said, the new Avengers, which is encompassing of Yelena and Bucky and R.I.P. Taskmaster. That was a rough one, but she's not in it anymore. We see that Sam is really not happy with the Thunderbolts right now. So what does that mean for his relationship with Bucky? And then again, what does that really mean for their relationship with this new Steve whenever he comes up and about and stuff? This is gonna take many years, by the way, so it's not like gonna happen anytime soon. So this story is going to be much more forward before we even get to seeing that take place. Because at the end of the day, the MCU can recapture old magic with new faces. That's not what I'm saying. It's the legacy of these two characters, and I hope they're doing it which I know Feige's very intentional about all, but even he said he doesn't he hasn't liked any final script that has come to his desk. So he is putting things out there he's not 100% happy with, and until he's 100% happy with the direction of these two recastings of Tony and Steve, then we'll get something good. I really hope he's not like, I'm not happy with this, but C-suite wants us to move forward, and that's the story that's going to be told, and then we're going to have a quality issue. So I'm just, because these two characters, Iron Man and Captain America, they had a beginning, a middle, and end, and the end was powerful and iconic, and it left me at peace. Yes, Robert Downey Jr. is coming back as Doomsday in Avengers Doomsday, which they're currently filming right now. So I think it's also not just confusion for me into how are they going to do this, but curiosity, because I really want to see them pull it off at the same time, because if they don't, the legacy of these characters will be tarnished, because I love this franchise so much, and I have since I was a young girl. And let's see what comes out of this. It's going to take a few years, like I said, but what do you guys think about a reboot in refreshing these new versions of these iconic characters? Because like I said, you guys know my feelings if you got up to the end of this video. So thank you for watching. But yeah, thoughts, feelings, ideas, concepts, like please share with me. And in the meantime, take care of yourself and I will see you guys in my next video. Okay, bye.